What would you do if you walked into your room and your $3,300 dream setup had vanished without a trace? No warning, no apology, just silence, and a betrayal that would split your family in two. I found out the hard way. The hum was gone. No RGB lights. No quiet fan whir. No screensaver dancing across my ultra-wide monitor. Just a pale outline in the dust where my rig used to sit. My chair scraped back as I stepped closer, staring at the empty desk like it might apologize. 3 years of side hustles, weekend jobs, skipped nights out. All of it vanished. I walked out of my room with my hands still at my sides. Mom was peeling potatoes at the kitchen counter. Dad was scrolling through his phone like he had nothing to confess. "Where's my PC?" I asked, my voice low. Mom didn't look up. "Nate, we needed to talk to you about that." Dad cleared his throat. "Before you get upset, just know, it's not permanent." I didn't say anything, just waited. Mom sighed. "Your sister needed help. Hannah's senior year, prom's coming up. Dress, limo, the whole thing. It was a last-minute situation." I stared at her. "So you sold my computer?" "It's just a computer," she said, finally meeting my eyes. "We figured you'd understand. You're a man now." Dad added, "It's temporary. We listed it online. Got a buyer quick. We'll pay you back as soon as we can." I laughed. Quiet. Sharp. "You sold a $3,300 custom build like it was a loan from your garage." "It wasn't about the money," Mom said. Like that made it better. "It was about family, about helping Hannah have a night she'll remember." I walked back to my room. The desk looked naked, violated. I opened eBay and typed in the specs. Every component I'd chosen over months. And there it was, my rig. All of it. Same case, same serial sticker on the GPU I'd scraped a corner off while installing. $3,300. Local pickup. I messaged the seller. "Still available?" "Yeah, just posted. Can meet today?" I showed up at a Starbucks parking lot half an hour later, cash in hand. The guy didn't ask questions. Just popped the trunk, handed it off, said he was helping a buddy's family offload some stuff quick. I drove home in silence. Plugged it back in like I was reassembling a part of myself. Nobody said a word when I walked in with it. Not Mom, not Dad, not Hannah, who was in the living room trying on earrings. That night, I sat in front of my screen. Opened a tab, typed, "Studio apartment near me." Another tab, "Starter credit builder loan." Another, "How to file a formal property theft report from a family member." I didn't hit submit. Not yet. But the decision was already made. I started packing slowly. Clothes, charger, headphones, notebooks. The things that were mine. Not because I owed them an explanation, but because I owed myself a life that wasn't built on someone else's excuses. They hadn't just sold a machine. They'd sold the last reason I had to stay. I didn't sleep that night. Not from anger. At least not the kind that burns. This was colder, heavier. The kind that hums under your ribs like something mechanical, winding tighter by the hour. In the morning I made coffee. Sat at the kitchen table while Hannah fluttered in wearing a satin robe, humming some pop song, giddy about some boutique hair appointment Mom had booked. I stared at her. "Did you know?" She paused, blinked, and tilted her head like I'd asked her a riddle. "About what?" "My computer. That they sold it." She didn't even blink. "I thought you'd be okay with it. You weren't really using it, were you?" The words hit harder than I expected. Like all the nights I'd spent after shifts, building, tweaking bios, budgeting for each part, meant nothing. You don't touch someone's things just because they're not using them. Mom walked in with her phone in hand. "It wasn't about ownership. It was about support. You always talk about being responsible. Well, your sister needed help." I just nodded. "So that makes stealing okay?" Dad glanced up from the newspaper. "We're not criminals, Nate. We're your parents." And somehow, that made it worse. Because if strangers had done this, I'd call the cops. But when it's your own family, they call it love and expect you to be grateful for the lesson. I left the house that afternoon. Not storming out, just quiet, focused. I went to the bank to finalize the credit builder loan, opened a separate checking account, everything in my name. No cosigners, no family backups. I was done pretending I owed them that trust. At home, I kept to myself. Didn't eat at the table. Didn't speak unless necessary. I was a ghost with a plan. One night, Dad knocked on my door. "Can we talk?" I stayed in my chair. He came in anyway, sat on the edge of my bed like it was his right. "I know we crossed a line," he said. "But you've got to understand. Family's complicated. Sometimes we make decisions that aren't fair in the moment, but necessary." I looked at him. "Necessary for who?" He didn't answer, just said, "You'll see one day when you're a father." That was the moment it hit me. He didn't regret what they did. He just regretted that I'd noticed. Later that week, I got an alert. My first paycheck from freelance work hit my new account. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Pure, untouched by guilt or obligation. That night, I started measuring my room. Not for upgrades, for departure. Because the house I grew up in was never going to feel like home again. And honestly, it never really had. The silence at dinner was the loudest it had ever been. Forks clinked. Hannah scrolled on her phone between bites, oblivious. Mom asked about her hair trial. Dad grunted something about traffic. No one asked where I'd been or why I wasn't touching my plate. That was fine. I wasn't hungry for food. I was hungry for something else now. Control. Distance. Air that didn't taste like debt. After dinner, I went back to my room, closed the door, and opened the Craigslist tab I'd bookmarked. 3 listings saved. All studios. All under $1,000. All mine if I wanted them bad enough. I clicked on the one with the biggest window. Next day I got up early and called in sick to my weekend shift. Took the bus to the rental office and filled out the form by hand. The leasing agent smiled when I handed over the deposit. First time living alone? I nodded. First time living. Back home I began removing traces of myself. Little things. USB sticks. Notebooks. The old hoodie hanging on the back of my chair. I packed them all carefully. Not because I was hiding, but because I wanted the moment I left to be absolute. That Sunday, Mom called me into the living room. Dad stood with his arms crossed. Hannah sat smug, arms folded, with freshly dyed hair and perfect nails. Your attitude's been off lately, Mom said. We're worried. You lied to me, I said calm. You stole from me. Dad shifted. We didn't steal. We borrowed. No, I cut in. You sold my property. You never asked. You didn't even tell me. You made a decision about something you had no right to touch. Mom looked like I'd slapped her. It was for your sister. And I'm not family? I asked. Or just the part of it you use when it's convenient? Hannah rolled her eyes. You're being dramatic. I turned to her. Did you know you wore a prom dress paid for by my graphics card? She blinked, didn't answer. That's when I pulled out the receipt. The cash withdrawal for $3,300. The eBay printout with the exact listing. My build. The screenshots of the messages. The pickup address. I laid them on the coffee table one by one like evidence at a trial. This is theft, I said, looking them in the eyes. You didn't just cross a boundary. You torched it. Dad's jaw clenched. What are you going to do? Call the police? No, I said. I'm going to leave. Mom went pale. Nate, come on, you don't mean that. I do. My voice was steady. I signed a lease yesterday. I move next week. Silence. Mom started crying. Dad looked like he'd swallowed a nail. Hannah stared at the floor, biting her lip. I stood. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done pretending this is a family when it's a negotiation. I walked out of the room without slamming the door, because when you know you're not coming back, there's no need to make noise. The final word is leaving. Packing felt less like moving and more like peeling myself off the walls. Every drawer I opened was a reminder. Old receipts from PC parts, Post-its with power supply wattage calculations, a note from my first job reminding me I was promotable material. I was 18 then, thought loyalty meant safety. Now I knew better. I packed in silence. No music, no distractions. Just the rhythm of folding, sorting, discarding. Every item was a decision. Do I take this into my new life, or let it rot with the old one? I left behind the family photo on my dresser, the one from 4 years ago, the one where Hannah's in the middle, Mom's hugging her like a trophy, and I'm on the side, holding the camera remote, half out of frame, fitting. In the hallway, I overheard them whispering. He's being dramatic. He's punishing us. We did what we had to. They still didn't get it. This wasn't a tantrum. It was an audit. Years of being the dependable one, the responsible one, the invisible one, and the bill had finally come due. That evening, Dad knocked on my door. You're making a mistake. I didn't answer. He stepped in anyway, holding a wad of bills. We've scraped together $800. It's not everything, but I don't want it, I said. You don't get to pay me off like that. Nate, I needed respect, not hush money. He left without a word. Later, I pulled up my browser, opened my bank's transfer page, and moved all remaining funds to the new account. Closed the old one, the one Mom had access to, just in case. No more just in case. No more safety nets they'd pull out from under me. Around midnight, Hannah knocked. I didn't answer. She slipped a note under the door anyway. Sorry if I made things worse. Prom was important to me. I read it, crumpled it, dropped it in the trash. That night, I fell asleep with my packed bags by the door, and my laptop open to a blank document titled Life Budget. For once, I didn't feel like I was running. I felt like I was arriving. I left on a Wednesday. No goodbye, no note, no dramatic confrontation. Just a quiet door click at 6:42 a.m., while the house slept under the illusion that nothing could ever change. The sky was still gray, the kind of early light that makes everything feel weightless and final. I slung the duffel over my shoulder, double-checked the straps on the box with my rig inside, mine again, and staying that way, and walked out the door I'd once thought was home. Bus stop, transfer, walk. The new apartment was nothing like my room. No posters, no dusty corners filled with forgotten hobbies, no creaky hallway floorboard that always gave me away. Just clean walls, quiet air, and space that belonged only to me. The landlord met me at the door, handed me the keys, and left with a nod. No lecture, no guilt trip, just transaction, trust, and a receipt. I unlocked the door and stepped into the studio. It was small, barely enough room for a bed, desk, and a second-hand couch, but it smelled like new paint and silence. I set the rig down gently, plugged it in, watched the RGB lights flicker to life like a heartbeat restarting. Then I sat on the floor, back against the wall, and let it hit me. No one knew where I was. No one could take this from me. No one could tell me what I owed them. For the first time, I was alone, and it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. That night, I cooked my own dinner, just pasta and sauce from a jar, ate it off a paper plate while the PC updated drivers and ran like it had missed me too. I should have felt lonely. I should have missed something. Instead, I opened a spreadsheet, titled it Freedom Costs, listed every dollar I had, every bill, every plan. At the top, in bold, everything moving forward is mine. The silence didn't scare me. It felt like a door finally closing behind me. And this time I had the key. The calls started 3 days later. First Mom, then Dad, then Hannah. I didn't pick up. Just watched the screen light up with names that now felt like strangers borrowing identities I used to trust. The voicemails were exactly what you'd expect. Mom crying, Dad defensive, Hannah, oddly casual, asking if I could help her with a college essay, like none of it had happened. I didn't delete them, just let them pile up, like old mail from an address I no longer lived at. By day, I worked, picked up extra hours at the campus tech lab, even stayed late cleaning monitors no one else wanted to touch. By night, I built out my freelance portfolio, one client at a time. Small jobs, logo fixes, back-end cleanup, tutoring first-year students on how not to fry a motherboard. The rig, the one they sold, the one I bought back, ran smoother than ever, like it knew it was finally being used the way it was meant to. I was still adjusting to the quiet. No one barging in, no footsteps in the hall, no passive-aggressive comments over dinner. Just me, my work, my rules. But freedom has its own weight. You carry it in the choices no one else will make for you, in the meals you forget to cook. In the nights, you wonder if independence is just loneliness with a better view. One night, Hannah sent a photo. It was the prom dress. Sparkly, silver blue. She was smiling, posing in front of the mirror. No caption, just that image. I stared at it for a minute. Not angry, not bitter, just done. I didn't reply. The next day I blocked their numbers. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. Sometimes healing looks like silence. Other times it looks like hitting block and never explaining yourself again. I wasn't theirs anymore, and I finally believed that was a good thing. The first night it rained, I stayed up just listening. In the old house, storms meant chaos. Power flickering, Mom complaining about leaks, Hannah yelling about her hair, Dad swearing while searching for candles. Noise, always noise. But here in the studio the rain was soft. Background, like white noise from the universe itself, reminding me I was somewhere new, somewhere mine. I sat by the window with a cup of coffee, instant, bitter, perfect, and watched water bead on the glass. No one needed anything from me. No one had a key but me. That fact settled somewhere deep in my spine like I could finally sit straight. I kept working. Landed 2 more freelance gigs that week, enough to cover rent, groceries, and a cheap office chair from Facebook Marketplace that didn't squeak every time I breathed. Nothing flashy, but every invoice I sent felt like a brick laid in a new foundation. I wasn't rich, but I was stable, and I knew every dollar that hit my account had no strings. I spent the evenings learning to cook actual food, not just pasta. I burned chicken once, undercooked rice twice, but I didn't mind. No one hovered. No one offered to take over like I was too slow or too messy. The kitchen was mine, mistakes included. On Friday, I got an email from Hannah. Subject, are you ever going to come back? I didn't open it right away. Just let it sit in my inbox, unopened, like a test I didn't study for on purpose. When I finally read it, it was exactly what I expected. Soft guilt, polished nostalgia, just enough vulnerability to pull on something that used to feel like loyalty. She wrote about missing our late-night talks, about how things at home weren't the same, about how she didn't realize how much the computer meant to me. And then, the kicker. Mom and Dad said they were just trying to do what was best for everyone. I know it hurt you, but can't we move past it now? Past it. As if betrayal had an expiration date. As if silence equaled forgiveness. As if the weight of what they'd done could be brushed aside with a few well-placed memories. I didn't reply. Instead, I drafted a message to myself. A simple truth I needed to read in my own words. They taught me to be useful, not valued. That's why I left, and that's why I'm not going back. Then I closed the laptop, stood up, stretched, and decided it was time to make this place feel less like a stopgap and more like home. New curtains, a real desk, a plant maybe, something green and alive to remind me this place, this life could grow into something good, not because anyone would visit, but because I would. The hardest part wasn't cutting them off. It was what came after. No one warns you that silence has echoes, not of their voices, but yours, the younger version, the one that still hoped, still defended, still made excuses. I'd be brushing my teeth or folding laundry and suddenly remember the time Dad helped me build my first desk, or how Mom used to tape notes to my lunchbox when I was 12. Those moments would float up, gentle as bubbles, then burst with the weight of what they chose to become. Guilt didn't show up like thunder. It came in trickles, random memories, a photo that auto-synced to my cloud, a song Hannah used to play on repeat, a mental reflex to share something with someone who stopped being safe. But I held the line, blocked emails, new number, no forwarding address. I even deleted their birthdays from my calendar, not out of spite, but because I'd finally stopped pretending this was temporary. This was permanent, and that decision made room for something I hadn't felt in years, peace. I started decorating my apartment with secondhand finds. Soft lighting, a thrift store bookshelf, a chipped mug I grew attached to. The space took on shape, personality, mine. On a Saturday morning, I wandered into a local makerspace, saw a flyer for a beginner CAD design course. Something about it sparked. I'd always been the tech guy, but this felt like something more. Something I chose, not just something I was useful for. I signed up. The class met twice a week, mostly people older than me looking for a hobby. I didn't mind. There were no expectations, no pressure, just creation. I designed my first 3D printed case fan bracket. Useless in the real world, but it was mine. Every curve, every setting. That night I stayed up late finishing it, not because anyone needed it, but because I wanted to. And that want, pure, undiluted by guilt or obligation, was new. I started looking forward to class. I started talking more with people who didn't want things from me, people who just liked the same weird stuff I did. One guy shared a template for a keyboard stand. Another brought snacks for everyone. Nobody needed to be needed. They just showed up, as they were. I realized then, I'd stopped measuring my worth in how much I could give away, and started building a life where I got to keep what I made. I didn't expect to hear from my cousin. We hadn't talked in over a year. He lived out of state, kept to himself mostly, but somehow, word of my move had trickled through the extended family grapevine. His message was short. Heard what happened. Just wanted to say, I get it. Call me if you want. At first I didn't respond. Too many burned bridges. Too much suspicion around every olive branch. But something about his message felt different. Quiet. Without strings. Like someone knocking, not barging in. I waited 2 days, then called. We talked for 3 hours. Turns out he'd left home at 19. Different reasons, same route. Expectations masked as love. Parents who saw him more as a plan than a person. He told me how he'd couch surfed, worked graveyard shifts, took online courses at a bus stop for the Wi-Fi. Now he was stable, tired but free. You're not crazy, he said. You're just done being used. That stuck with me. After the call, I sat by the window again. The same spot from that first rainy night. But the view felt different now. Not like a clean slate, more like a foundation I'd bled for. The streetlights didn't feel so cold. The night didn't feel so quiet. I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was finally somewhere no one could steal from me. I started journaling. Not every day, just when the thoughts got too loud. Writing wasn't something I did before. But now it helped me organize what I was building. Not a resume, not a pitch, just a record of who I was becoming. One entry read, "They taught me how to endure, but never how to ask for better. I'm learning that part on my own." Another, "Family who only loves you when you're useful isn't family. It's a job you never applied for." Sometimes I'd write questions I didn't know how to answer. Like, if they had asked, would I have said yes? Why did it take a computer to show me the truth? How much of myself did I lose before I finally stopped giving it away? The questions didn't scare me anymore. I wasn't writing to fix anything. I was writing to witness it, to make sure I didn't forget how I got here, and why I'm never going back. Around the same time, I got a DM from one of Hannah's friends, someone I barely remembered from school. She apologized for liking that prom post, said she didn't know the full story, said Hannah made it sound different, said she used to think I was dramatic, but now she wasn't so sure. I didn't reply, but I appreciated it. A small crack in the narrative they'd been building without me. It reminded me that truth has its own gravity. You don't always need to shout it. Sometimes you just need to live it loud enough that people start noticing on their own. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I was just busy building the kind of life they'd never imagined for me. One where I belonged to myself first. One where I didn't need to be chosen, saved, or explained. Just one where I stayed. The day my refund check hit, I walked into a furniture store with a number in my head and no one to convince me not to spend it. I bought a desk. Not just a slab of wood with metal legs, but the desk. Solid walnut. Wide enough to stretch out every project I cared about. Deep enough to remind me I had room now. The guy behind the counter asked if I wanted it delivered. I said no. I wanted to carry it in myself. Back at the apartment, I spent the whole afternoon rearranging. Dismantled the folding table I'd been using, rolled up the rug, vacuumed the floor like it mattered, because it did. Every inch of this space had been claimed, not by force, not by inheritance, but by effort. I set up the desk in front of the window, unboxed a small lamp, placed my rig in the corner where the airflow was best. It didn't hum anymore. It purred, like it knew this time was different. That night, I sat down and opened a blank doc. No assignments, no deadlines, just words I wanted to write. I wrote a letter, to them, not to send, but to release. I wrote about the nights I stayed silent because I thought love meant endurance. About the weekends I worked while Hannah got to just be a kid. About how every small betrayal stacked up like bricks until I realized I was the one building the prison. And then I wrote what I would have said if they'd asked. You could have had my help. You just couldn't have it for free anymore. When I finished, I didn't cry. I just closed the laptop, leaned back, and let the stillness settle around me like armor. This wasn't about a computer. It never was. It was about who I became when they stopped pretending I didn't matter. I was never supposed to leave. I was supposed to stay useful, quiet, available. Instead, I chose myself. And that choice? That's mine. Forever. The next morning, I made breakfast slowly. Eggs, toast, Coffee strong enough to keep the past at bay. I sat by the window, sunlight catching the corner of the new desk, and realized I hadn't checked my phone in almost a day. No missed calls. No guilt, no apologies either, but I didn't need them anymore. I opened a notebook and jotted down 5 things I'd done that month. Small victories. Paid rent early. Got another freelance client. Said no without apologizing. Cooked something new. Slept through the night without dreaming of home. It wasn't a grand finale. There were no fireworks, no dramatic goodbye scene. But for the first time, I was proud of the quiet. And that, I decided, was what freedom really sounded like.